All right, let's dive into one of history's most famous and, honestly, most debated prophecies. It's a vision that has fascinated people for thousands of years, and it just might hold a secret that's been hiding in plain sight.
So here's the big question we're tackling today. What if the standard interpretation, the one you've probably heard your whole life, just gets it wrong? We're going to explore a really compelling case that the true fulfillment of this prophecy is way more precise and historically grounded than most people even realize.
Okay, so picture this. The year is around 603 BC. The most powerful man on the planet, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, has this dream that absolutely terrifies him. He sees this huge, imposing statue, and it turns out this figure is basically a roadmap for the entire course of future history. Now, for centuries, there's been a standard go-to explanation for what the four parts of this statue really mean. It's the one you'll find in most textbooks and commentaries. And the sequence seems pretty straightforward, right? The golden head, that's Babylon. Then you get the silver kingdom of Persia, the bronze of Greece, and finally, the legs of iron, the Roman Empire. And look, this has been the dominant view for almost 2,000 years. But what if it has a massive, fundamental flaw? Because when you really start to dig into the historical record, some pretty serious problems with this whole Rome theory begin to pop up. And this is where our investigation really kicks off.
Okay, here's problem number one, the missing kingdom. You see, after the Greek Empire started to fade, the Maccabees led this incredible revolt and established the Hasmonean dynasty. We're talking about an independent Jewish kingdom that ruled for 126 years. So why on earth would a prophecy all about Jewish history just completely ignore it?
And then there's the description of that final kingdom. The prophecy calls it a mix of iron and clay. Partly strong, yeah, but also partly brittle, something that's likely to shatter. And I mean, come on, does that sound like the Roman Empire to you? Rome was arguably the most durable, long-lasting political power in all of human history. The description just doesn't fit. Rome's staying power was just staggering. And this wasn't some minor academic mistake, by the way. This belief that Rome was the fragile iron and clay kingdom led to absolute disaster. Jewish rebels in the 1st and 2nd centuries tragically bet the farm on Rome being on the verge of collapse. They were catastrophically wrong. So if Rome isn't the fourth kingdom, then what is? Well, the answer might just lie in a single, often overlooked phrase in the original text, a little clue that completely reframes the entire prophecy.
The real key is hidden in how the statue is finally destroyed. Now, most English Bibles say the wind swept the pieces away without leaving a trace. But the original languages say something much more specific, something that would have hit a first-century Jewish reader like a ton of bricks.
And here it is. This is the smoking gun. The Greek translation of Daniel uses the phrase, "and no place was found for them." Now get this, that exact word-for-word phrase shows up again in the New Testament. In fact, it's thought to be the only direct verbatim quote from the Old Testament in the entire book of Revelation. That is almost definitely not a coincidence.
So why is that phrase such a big deal? Well, because that Greek word for place, topos, wasn't just any old place. It was common shorthand, a kind of code for one very specific place, the temple in Jerusalem. So when the book of Revelation quotes Daniel, it's signaling that the prophecy's climax is the permanent, total elimination of the temple system. So, once you have that textual key, the identity of the true fourth kingdom starts to snap into focus. And here's the twist, it's not a foreign empire at all.
This alternative theory suggests the fourth kingdom wasn't a foreign power, but a sequence of Jewish ruling powers, starting with that missing Hasmonean kingdom. This progression, from a strong independent kingdom to a shaky Roman puppet state to a final doomed revolutionary government, it perfectly matches the prophecy's description of a kingdom that starts strong but becomes dangerously unstable.
And you can really see the two phases here. First, you have the Hasmoneans. That's your iron, militarily powerful, independent, crushing their enemies. But then comes the later Herodian dynasty, and that's your iron and clay, a totally volatile mixture of Jewish identity and pagan, Roman-backed rule that just could not hold together. You know, this mixture wasn't just about different groups of people. The whole political system was built on contradictions. It was trying to serve two masters, the God of Israel and the Emperor of Rome, and it was just doomed from the start.
I mean, just look at all the fault lines. You've got King Herod, who's pouring money into building up the temple, but then he turns around and defiles it with Roman symbols. You have pagan cities and Roman emperor worship spreading through the Holy Land. And to top it all off, Roman policy often sided with the rival Samaritans, which was a direct attack on Jewish identity. It was a pressure cooker.
And all that pressure finally just exploded in something called the Eagle Incident. Herod put this massive golden eagle, the symbol of Rome, right over the main entrance to the temple. Two teachers basically said, "We can't stand for this," and they inspired their students to go tear it down. The result? Herod, literally on his deathbed, had all 40 of those young men burned alive. That is the iron and clay cracking under the strain.
Okay, so how does this new interpretation wrap everything up? Well, it argues the prophecy isn't some science fiction puzzle about our future, but a roadmap of historical events that concluded with absolute surgical precision in the 2nd century. This fulfillment unfolds in 3 clear stages. First, the stone strikes, when Rome flattens Jerusalem in 70 CE. Then comes the grinding, where for decades Rome just pulverizes any remaining resistance. And finally, the wind blows, when the final catastrophic Bar Kokhba revolt is crushed and the whole system is wiped away for good by 136 CE.
And this part is just incredible. We have coins from that last revolt, and they show that the rebels under Bar Kokhba actually managed to rebuild the temple. But after Rome crushed them, it wasn't just destroyed, it was obliterated so completely that, just like the prophecy said, no place was found for them. The textual clue and the hard evidence from archaeology, they match perfectly.
So, the huge takeaway here, according to this analysis, is that the prophecy was never about trying to predict 21st century politics. It was about marking the historic transition from the Old Covenant, which was centered on a physical building, to the New Covenant reality of a global church.
But what about that very last part of the prophecy? The rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. Well, this interpretation says that mountain is the unstoppable 2,000-year growth of Christianity, which really took off right as that old temple-based system was being permanently dismantled.
And this leaves us with a really fascinating final thought. If this interpretation is right, it completely shifts our focus. We stop trying to decode future headlines and start trying to understand the profound historical events that have already happened. It suggests that history is a story that has, in many ways, already reached its climax. So what does that mean for how we see our own place in that story?